So we have a little bit to finish up for our lecture for week 6, but just a reminder as to what is due this week. You have the profile that you're going to create based on the little scenario here. Should be about 300 words. You know, the requirements are right here. There's no separate handout or anything. And then the rough draft of your investigative plan. This should be the complete plan, as well as 5 questions that you are kind of guessing that a defense attorney might ask you, as well as your responses, and that's what this document is for right here. It gives you just the Q&A that you can fill in for the defense attorney questions. So there's not too much to that. That's just a singular thing. I did, in your announcements section, post what I had talked about on Tuesday, and I did send this over email to kind of assist you in understanding like what these different pieces are. So this is what needs to be in your investigative plan, which you're doing the rough draft for this week. And then next week is your final submission, which I'm going to be getting into in a second, which includes the entire investigative plan, as well as the defense attorney questions, your reflection, and field notes and evidence log. So the final submission, you have to include everything as one big document. But for this week, it's the investigative plan and then the defense attorney questions. So I put that in the announcements on Tuesday. Now next week, we're going to our lecture topic is death investigations, so that's always interesting. And for your assignments, you have, it seems like there's a lot of stuff in here, but you have, you can get started on your final exam essays if you want. These are actually all open now. You have access to the entire course now, so you can go into week 7, you can go into week 7.5. So it's going to be the same policy that I had for the midterm, where you only do 2 of the essay questions, any 2, and then I will give you full credit for the 2 that you do not complete. So these are the 4 questions. I have not compared them to the final exam. I am hoping they all match up to the final exam, unlike the midterm. But these are the 4 questions that you have to choose from, so you can get started on those choosing 2. But that is for your exam, which is due Monday, July 6th. For next week, you're going to have a reflection on the on the death investigation lecture. That's part of next week. And then the only other thing is, actually, there's 2 other things. The final submission of your portfolio project, so you just make any corrections and then submit it in one document. And then you do have a brief crime scene assignment where I actually had just opened that up. I'll talk more about it on Tuesday. Why does this one always come up? I have not talked about that, John, whether if you do all 4, you could get extra points. You know what, if you guys do choose to do that for the final, I'll allow that. If you choose to do all 4 essays, I will give you bonus points. I have to assign the bonus points separately, but so, it won't show up exactly in the exam when you take it. It'll have to be something I add after the fact, but yeah, if you guys want to do all 4 essays, I'll give you extra credit for that. That can be open for everybody. And then this is the other assignment. They just actually give you some information, and then they want you to answer these questions based on the information they gave you. So it's just a brief assignment next week that looks at the crime scene procedures again. So this actually, considering what you've been doing for your project, should not be too much for you to handle. They do want you to get 500 words in, but with all these questions that need to be answered based on this little crime scene scenario they give you, it shouldn't be much of a problem. I'll talk about it more on Tuesday, but again, that's just the sneak peek for the crime scene assignment for next week. So again, next week's sneak preview, you have access to the essay questions for the final exam. You have a reflection on the lecture. You have the final submission for your portfolio project into ePortfolio, and then the crime scene assignment where you're answering questions. So you're not like doing research. They're basically giving you a scenario, a fact pattern, and then you're answering questions based upon that. So that's next week. And then, like I said, we don't have class, but week 7.5 is the last day of the session. And you have the final exam, of course, to complete, as well as just a reflection on the portfolio project itself. So those are the 2 things that are due for week 7.5 at 11:59 p.m. So that's the sneak preview for the rest of our session, because I guess if I look at this, if I actually take a look at the calendar, not counting today, our session's over in like 10 days total, including weekends. I think that takes us to July 6th. So yeah, we are, right down to the last days of our session. So if you have any questions or concerns, I did see, a lot of things got turned in over the weekend. So I'm working on grading. I actually have to go out of town this weekend, but I will be trying to get some things done. What I can tonight, I actually, even after I get off your class, very busy night, but I will try to do a little bit more tonight, as well as on Sunday. So hopefully I have everything caught up this weekend. Does anybody have any questions about the rest of the session, the assignments due the rest of the session, content, anything like that? And then again, student surveys, that's about the only other thing, making sure you guys get those done. Okay. I am like parched. My throat is super dry today. My voice is even kind of squeaky, so I apologize. But we don't have too much left to talk about, so I just want to cover the very last section of your lecture, which is somewhat separate from the profiling section. That's why I saved it for today. Looking at electronic database and information networks. This is actually almost a refresher of what you learned a lot about in the CRJU 145 class, the Justice Information System class, because that class focuses a lot on electronic databases and sharing of information amongst different agencies and things like that. So this is just a little refresher of that, but it's helpful because it also is important for investigations. So you could have, it's a lot easier today with the internet and with records being stored electronically, because it used to, if you have an offender that committed a crime in one jurisdiction who gets arrested for a different crime in another jurisdiction, it would be a lot harder to make that connection without the access to electronics that we have today. So now, with fingerprint databases, DNA databases, you may have DNA from a crime scene in your jurisdiction. Somebody gets arrested in a different jurisdiction and their DNA ends up in the database, CODIS. Then, it pings back to that arresting agency that this person is a suspect in another crime in another jurisdiction. So, that is one of the benefits of something like CODIS in the digital age that we are in. So we're going to talk about some of the different databases that are available to law enforcement for this sharing of information. You have intra-departmental databases where it's all within an agency. Intra, I-N-T-R-A, means within the same agency versus like other agencies. So these could be like a photo gallery with that particular department has. It could be their standard operating procedures, evidence logs for that particular department. Those are things that are important just for the officers within that agency. Really what we want to focus on are interdepartmental databases, which allow, all the agencies really in the country to access each other's information. Everybody puts the information into this one database, and that information can be shared across all levels, local, state, and federal. So this gives you some of the bigger databases that are available. The National Crime Information Center, largest crime information network in the U.S. The FBI is the one that operates it, but all agencies put information in. They have information on people that are wanted, missing, unidentified. They have criminal histories in there. They have fingerprint classifications, vehicles that have been stolen and recovered, firearms that have been stolen and recovered, other forms of heavy equipment that have been stolen and recovered that kind of fall into different categories, and even more. So if you get pulled over by police, the state's database gets checked along with NCIC to see if there's a warrant on file. My husband left with my little one so that it would have some peace and quiet around here. But I forget the name of the database that the state police use, but it's not the NCIC, but they do all link together. So, and you can go onto the NCIC website and learn a lot about all the different categories of information that they store. National Law Enforcement Telecommunications System links the law enforcement agencies and other criminal justice agencies with the DMV and other licensing departments. So, I mean, when a police officer pulls somebody over, not only do they have access to like a warrant, an outstanding warrant, but they also have information regarding any records through their DMV. Vehicle information, license registration, driver's licenses, any driving records, criminal history records, boat, plane, and sex offender registration information as well. So it just gives them, additional information about the person that they've pulled over. Now, Interpol stands for International Police, so this actually goes outside of U.S. borders. It has information on international criminal activity. Central Index System, you've got information about people that are immigrants, either legal immigrants, naturalized citizens, aliens, and they look at this to determine if they're eligible for a visa. The Citizenship and Immigration Services runs this database. Citizenship and Immigration used to be part of the INS before 9/11. It was Immigration and Naturalization Services, which housed, they took care of people trying to legally enter the country as well as people illegally entering the country. Since 9/11, it's split into two different bureaus. So you've got U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, which is handling people that are legally trying to either enter or stay in the country, whereas you have ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, which handles illegal immigration. And then you have VICAP. You may have heard of VICAP on television, Violent Criminal Apprehension Program. Another national database operated by the FBI. They have different MOs or signatures. We talked a lot about signatures and MOs on Tuesday. So VICAP actually has information about MOs and signatures so that it allows agencies to link crimes that may be related to a serial offender. And this is especially important for crimes committed in different states. Most serial offenders, all their crimes are committed in one area, but there are circumstances where that offender maybe moves and picks up in another area, or they travel, maybe they're like a truck driver or something, and so their victims are spread through different areas of the country. And if they have a specific signature or MO that can be put into VICAP, it allows agencies to link those crimes together. And of course, if the crimes do cross state boundaries, then the FBI will have jurisdiction to get involved because it's interstate, that's what I was trying to say, interstate crime occurring in multiple states. Then there's other sorts of databases, like they don't really use the weapons database for ballistics anymore. At least that's what the New York State Police told us, that the database for ballistics was not very useful. It was, there just wasn't a way to keep everything cataloged, so they don't really use that. But there's also databases regarding sex trafficking. We've already talked about APHIS and CODIS databases in one of the earlier lectures. So, those are definitely ways to assist in solving crimes based on evidence that you've gathered from the crime scene. But if you have DNA or fingerprints from a crime scene, you put them into APHIS or CODIS, and the offender has never been fingerprinted or their DNA has never been put in the system before, then that doesn't really help. What it could end up helping is once you put it in the system as evidence in an unsolved crime, like I said, if someone that matches those prints or that DNA sequence gets arrested in another jurisdiction and then their prints and DNA go in, at that point, like I said, the arresting agency would be able to make that connection. I keep mentioning upon arrest, fingerprints and DNA. Every jurisdiction can do fingerprints upon arrest. Different states have different rules about the collection of DNA. The Supreme Court has approved the taking of DNA upon arrest as just an identifier, but not all states take DNA upon arrest. Most states will take DNA upon conviction. Some take DNA as part of the booking process. It's just a cheek swab. Like, it doesn't take very much. You run a little Q-tip inside somebody's cheek. The case that the Supreme Court heard was an interesting one, similar to the example I gave, where there was an unsolved rape, but there was a rape kit that was completed and the DNA was entered into CODIS. It just didn't get any hits. That same offender got arrested for assault in a different jurisdiction. The jurisdiction that arrested him for assault did a cheek swab upon arrest. So his DNA and fingerprints were entered upon arrest. When they entered his DNA upon arrest, it came back that his DNA was in a rape kit for an unsolved crime. So of course, he ended up getting convicted of the rape, and he fought it and said they shouldn't have had his DNA because he had not yet been convicted of the assault when they took his DNA. And so he basically said, you never would have found me if they hadn't illegally taken my DNA. That was his claim, was that since he had not yet been convicted of a crime, they shouldn't have taken his DNA. So that case made it all the way to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court said, no, your DNA is really just another identifier, no different than your fingerprints. I mean, it's not invasive. In fact, it's almost easier to do the cheek swab than it is to take your fingerprints. So the Supreme Court said taking DNA upon arrest was constitutional. It did not violate a defendant's rights. Now, like I said, just because the Supreme Court has said that doesn't mean every jurisdiction is now jumping, into doing that. But that is, at least we know it is constitutional. So New York definitely takes DNA upon conviction. They might take, for certain felony arrests, they might take DNA. I can't remember. It's been a while. But they definitely take it upon conviction. The last section of this lecture covers social media, because it is becoming more and more important in criminal investigations, and law enforcement is getting more involved in using social media for multiple reasons, for investigations as well as community relations. So this just has 4 aspects of social media that law enforcement may use. Facebook gives lots of information, especially if people don't have their accounts private. It makes it very easy for Facebook or for law enforcement officers to go through and anonymously kind of stalk a person. They can have their own profile that's not law enforcement related, and request to be someone's friend to get more information on their page. You would be surprised how many people post criminal activity on social media accounts. Or maybe it wouldn't be. But there have been cases where they go on Facebook Live and live stream criminal activity. There have been cases where photos get posted of criminal activity, where, just posts, discuss what they've done. So definitely a way for law enforcement to gather information. Pretty much the same thing with Twitter. It can be a good source of information. They can follow different suspects. Craigslist can actually be used by criminals to commit their crimes. So it might be people committing scams. There are definitely prostitution rings that are on Craigslist, human trafficking on Craigslist. So it's definitely a good source of information for investigators. And then same thing with YouTube. So many criminals actually post their crimes on YouTube. So again, I don't know what makes them think it won't be used, if they don't think it'll ever be discovered. I'm not really sure what the thought process or lack of thought process is for that one. But there are definitely YouTube videos of criminal activity. There have even been gangs that post songs on YouTube that the language in the songs is against another gang, so it kind of like they can actually start rivalries and gang wars using music on YouTube. So it's really quite incredible what social media has done to assist criminals in their behavior, but also to share criminal behavior. I know some of the benefits of social media for law enforcement, in addition to gathering information for investigations, is actually building relationships with the community. So I think I mentioned it in this class. Did I mention West Seneca Police Department's Facebook and Twitter pages? I don't remember if I told you guys about West Seneca, but yeah. So that's right, because they had just posted like a Father's Day joke or something. But it's really a good way of building relationships with the community, showing like that they're human. Not only did they have some, do they use humor, but they also, post some of the things that they actually are doing within the community. Let's see, 5 hours ago, the West Seneca Police Department posted that they found, it's a picture of a kind of a chubby, maybe Chihuahua mix. It's a dog, so I'm allowed to say chubby because I'm talking about a dog. It looks like some sort of Chihuahua mix, maybe. They said they found him jaywalking in the 500 block of Main Street. But they said he was really friendly, and if no one claims him, they want to keep him. So they just put kind of cute stuff on there, but at the same time, they're offering a service by, posting the dog's picture and, saying we have him, basically saying your dog's safe, so, come get him. The police blotter for last week, they post a weekly blotter, usually every Monday evening, and it goes through the previous week's calls. So it tells them how many calls they get per day, and then they give a summary of some of the more significant ones. So, like, I'm just going to scroll to the weekend just to see how many calls they got. So, like, on Friday, last Friday, June 19th, West Seneca Police Department had 93 calls that day, and they had somebody throwing fireworks out their front door. The person was intoxicated that was doing this. That's never a good combination. Somebody on Reserve Road reported their home was egged. Somebody reported an unknown person filed for unemployment benefits using their social security number. So, that's a form of identity theft. There was a tire fire on Indian Church Road near Great Lakes Pizza. Lots of fireworks complaints. And someone's tires were slashed. And then it tells you, like, the detectives are investigating the case of the identity theft and the tires being slashed. So there's, it just gives, some highlights of calls, because a lot of the calls might be medical emergencies, car accidents. So those are just the calls that they responded to. Saturday, they had 67 calls. But it's really a way of sharing things with the community. Their Father's Day post, just because I had mentioned it before, it said, several of our patrol cars had their wheels stolen off of them overnight. We are working tirelessly to catch those responsible. Total bad dad joke. And then it said, happy Father's Day to all the dads out there. Call us for a full investigation into anyone that touches the thermostat today or leaves the door open. Remember, you aren't paying to cool the whole neighborhood. So it's amusing, but it makes, again, I think it helps build the relationship with the community. They also share information about, like, traffic issues. There were a couple roads closed down on Saturday night because a driver, they believe, suffered from a medical condition and caused an accident. So they were talking about the roads being shut down and then reopened and things like that. But they also post, like, photographs of suspects if they have, like, surveillance of somebody that's committed a crime. Those types of things can be posted as well. So, yeah, I just use West Seneca as an example because I just love all their good humor jokes. Orchard Park Police Department I follow as well, but they don't usually post as much. They do, but they don't have the very amusing posts that West Seneca does. The most recent one, they have pictures of people that were shoplifting at Target, and they're trying to get information. But again, that's a form of investigation, is to provide photographs on social media, and then people can respond, and they are able to solve cases in that way. So definitely a benefit of social media. We see a lot of negatives of social media, but that's one of the benefits. Okay. So I think that wraps up the lecture part. I'm not going to go over, these are things that you guys can do, the activities in the lecture, but that's about it for the lecture. One of the things I just want to point out when it comes to social media, the lecture itself is done, but as students who are going to be entering the workforce, be very careful of what you post on social media, the internet, anything. It can come back to haunt you. A lot of people just delete all social media accounts when they're looking for a job, but that doesn't mean, if they're doing a background investigation later, that they're not able to dig those up, or people that are being interviewed as part of your background investigation will say, well, they used to post all this stuff on Facebook. That can come back, or on Snapchat, or, I'm old, I guess, so Facebook is still something it's my main source of social media based on my age, but Snapchat or Instagram or TikTok or whatever the most popular things are today, those types of things can come back and haunt you, whether it's, even if it's not something criminal, it doesn't have to be something criminal, but if it's immoral, you don't want to have to explain to a potential employer, whether it's in the criminal justice field or otherwise, why you were posting these kinds of things, or why you were involved in these kinds of activities, or whatever. So that's just my little warning to be something to be aware of, something to be thinking of as you're entering